You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Welcome to Busy Mom Talk, real talk for real moms. I'm your host, Kia, mom of two. So if you're juggling kids, coffee, and chaos, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. So welcome to the first episode of Busy Mom Talk. It definitely is a little bit strange doing a solo, considering I'm just talking to myself. But this is kind of going to be a little introduction of what Busy Mom Talk will entail. And I know we're doing a little bit of a transition, so bear with me through the next couple of weeks as we go deeper into Busy Mom Talk. But we will also have lots of other exciting things in the works. So Busy Mom Talk is something that is branched out of the podcast that I previously was doing. Let's maybe dive deep into the podcast. So my goals of this podcast are to build community. So if you've ever spoken with me on the sense of talking about the podcast and maybe what it entails and what we're going to be doing with it, my goals are to build a community. So this will necessarily be a hub for moms to feel like they have a village. And my goals of getting there are to create community to build this thing, because I don't want this podcast and this organization to be mine to keep. I necessarily want to build something so that it will continue on even when I step back. And it's so important that this be a nonprofit, because this is something that I don't want to profit from. I don't want to profit from people who have been hurting or healing, and I want to have it so that it's accessible for everybody. And maybe in the future things will shift a little bit or, change, but my goal is to make sure that we have it accessible as possible. I want it to be where people can come, not just moms, just anybody, even caregivers, parents, fathers, so that they can get advice that's not biased, that's evidence-based, hear stories that are experienced, lived. My goal is that nobody has to endure what I endured, or what other moms have to endure, or other parents per se, because society has this idea that moms or even parents just have to do what they have to do because that's the way it works. And parenthood is hard, and motherhood is hard, giving birth is hard. Those are all things that you sign up for the moment you decide you want to become a parent. And why, yes, I think that there is some truth to it. I don't necessarily think we need to be suffering, especially not suffering alone or in silence. I think that having these important conversations builds something that allow it to change. And I'm not saying that this change is going to be happening overnight. When you look at systemic changes and all of the issues that kind of arise, especially in Canada and the United States, they're not something that can be changed overnight or in a short duration. This is going to be a change that we would see over years and decades. But I want to add to that. I want to add to that change, and I have this deep desire to leave the world better than I found it. And I know I'm not going to be able to leave it in the best shape or form possible, but if one person says to me, I listened to your podcast, or I watched your content, I read your blog, or, I connected with somebody that you suggested and it saved me from a place where I never knew I could be saved from, that would make me feel like I've done my job. And this wholeheartedly is a passion project. I am completely funding it in the works of making it into a nonprofit organization. So I am actually doing my master's of philanthropy, which is very different from my undergrad, where I did global law and social justice. But I'm very excited. So by doing this program, I am getting experience, and I'm in the room with the same people who have the same goals of changing the world in some way. While none of them are in the well, I shouldn't say none of them, but not all of them are in the mom world of work-wise. A lot of them are mothers or parents or work closely with parents. And I think it's a common theme that once we can make the world better, everything has that domino effect. So by doing this, I'm hoping that this will become bigger than anything I could have ever expected and even bigger than I can even handle, because I want this to be a group of moms who contribute to this and to do this out of the same place that their healing self needed. So this podcast will definitely have like a 360 shift, if you want to say, but community events, outreach, and stuff like that will definitely be a priority. And then we're definitely going to be trying to expand the brand and make it so that it's not just something that you see online. I want this to be something that people just talk about in conversation. And like there's so many great resources in Ontario and Canada. I'm not too sure about the United States because I don't really dive deep into that part at all right now. But I want there to be that bridge to get you to those resources. And I know that there's so many obstacles and barriers, and not everybody will be able to get there. But when you break down those barriers and you help those obstacles and you have somebody who's in your corner rooting you on and taking off that mental load of how to get that help that you desperately need, I think that it contributes greatly to the overall well-being of parents. It makes life easier for the household, the family unit, the village that you're in. And I always say, if you want a village, you need to be a villager. And what I mean by that is you could be having the worst day possible, but you can still show up in some way for somebody else. And you don't have to give your all. You don't have to give anything really to just have a prayer or a thought for that person if that's all you can do. But as long as you're still showing up for your village in some way, or even stating, I'm in such a bad place right now, I can't show up for you, it's a first step to creating that village. And, talking about village, there's a lot of vulnerability in creating your village because you're asking for help, you're explaining yourself in a sense of this is what I need, this is how I can show up. But it's so important to note that you can show up for people in the ways that they need, even if you're hurt. And even if you're going through it and you need the help, it's okay to ask for it. And that's the point of a village. So I'm not always going to have the sugar you need to bake the cake, but maybe next time I will. And I think that's the most important thing, especially in motherhood, is finding that small village of people or the big village or whatever it may be or look like to you, and to nourish it and to fill the cup of the village and to definitely prioritize the village. So sometimes, when you're experiencing something, especially postpartum, you don't necessarily know in the moment what's going on. At least for me, when I had my daughter, I was so confused. Everyone kept saying I had postpartum depression and I knew I didn't have it, but something more was going on, but nobody wanted to listen. So that's the other thing I've actually learned about being in a class for 2 weeks is I used to talk a lot. And when I say that, I truly mean I love to talk. My dad used to say, as soon as I talked, I never stopped when I was a child. And I truly believe that. I just like conversation and storytelling, but the last 2 weeks I really learned how to listen. And I think that was maybe a missing piece for me, is that I didn't necessarily stop to listen all the time, especially in my own village or to my children, my family unit. And I'm learning. So I think that's the other thing, is giving yourself grace, giving people in your life grace. But necessarily this will be a hub where moms can come and they can feel like this is trusted advice. These are amazing people who are not going to be having biased advice of whether you should sleep train your child or not sleep train, or don't breastfeed to sleep. And there's just so many different things in parenting that end up being political. And it's funny because so many people will argue that parenting is not political, but I feel like it's the most political thing. And I've realized everything is so political, everything is so judgment based, and people are so quick to have assumptions. But I want that to be so not a thing. And through this podcast and through this organization, my goal is to break that barrier down so that moms don't have to feel the shame or the guilt by choosing what they think is best for their family. And I think it's different when somebody comes to you and says, my baby won't sleep, I refuse to co-sleep with them, and they won't sleep train, and it's so hard. And they seek help from somebody who is a sleep consultant, and the sleep consultant says, well, let's try a different approach. I think that's completely fine, and that's not where I'm trying to get. But when you have that judgment of, well, you're doing it all wrong. Whatever you're doing isn't right and it's not working, so you should do this way. I don't think that's the way to go. And with parenting too, we often forget we also need to be parented sometimes because we're doing this for the first time. I never been a parent to a 4-year-old before until my 4-year-old turns 4. And I never been a parent to 2 children until I had my daughter. And it looks so differently from one child to the next. And basically where I'm getting at is that this podcast, I want to be everything that I envisioned and more. So if you're wondering if there's going to be differences in the podcast style and stuff like that, it's pretty much going to be basically similar, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper. We're going to go a little bit broader with who we bring on, and we're going to have that involvement with the community a lot. You'll definitely be seeing content and stuff like that of me getting out into the community, doing more videos and stuff like that within the community. You'll also be seeing events. And, as sad as I am that everything has kind of shifted and we're here now, I am definitely grateful to be able to have all of you who still choose to trust in my vision. And, I'm hoping that what comes next. And I know what comes next will be so great, and I'm so excited for all of this. So definitely stay tuned. We have amazing guests for this season. So you might see some similar faces or familiar faces from the past, but you'll definitely be seeing lots of new and exciting people who have so many amazing things to share, whether it be their experience or just their knowledge. And, through this, I've met so many amazing people that I never would have probably had a conversation with had I not done this. So I'm so grateful, and I'm super excited to see what we will have in store. So on that note, I definitely would love for you all to let me know your thoughts and let me know things that you would really love to see. And I've said this so many times on Instagram and whatnot, but when you guys message me and say, I really liked this, or, I wanted to learn more about this, or can you ask your guest this? It just sets something in my soul on fire that it just gives me such deep passion. And I'm definitely getting out of my comfort zone here. So speaking already is a hard thing for me, especially showing my face. I'm not sure if you guys have realized, but I do not really love it. But I'm definitely getting out of my comfort zone. And I will leave you with one quote that my professor said was that when imposter syndrome leaves you, there's no more room for growth. So if you're feeling imposter syndrome, that's a good thing. If you're feeling uncomfortable in life, that's a good thing. And I hope you all love this journey as much as I do, and we'll see you next week with our very first episode with a guest. Thanks for listening.